I have seen a lot in my 42 years on the bench. I have watched people lie to my face, cry crocodile tears, and try every trick in the book to rewrite what happened. I have had defendants deny things that were captured on camera. I have had attorneys argue that their clients' actions were misunderstood. But I have never, in all my decades wearing this robe, had a man sit in front of me, watch a video of himself striking a woman in the face, and tell me she deserved it because she asked him a question he did not like. That happened on the morning of June 3, 2024, at exactly 9:51 a.m., when Tristan Mercer, age 26, son of media conglomerate chairman Richard Mercer, walked into my Providence courtroom and learned that the one thing his father's empire could not control was the truth. You think you have seen arrogance humbled before? Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happened in my courtroom that morning is going to stay with you for a long time. Let me take you back to how this whole thing started. The case file was on my desk alongside a USB drive containing footage I had reviewed in chambers the night before. Case number 2024-CR-5518, assault in the second degree, criminal intimidation, and obstruction of a journalist. The defendant was Tristan Mercer, age 26, son of Richard Mercer, chairman and majority shareholder of Mercer Media Holdings, a conglomerate that owned 3 television stations, 2 newspapers, a digital media platform, and a chain of radio stations across New England. The Mercer family's net worth was estimated at $340 million. Tristan held the title of Vice President of Development at Mercer Media, a position that, according to court filings, had been created specifically for him after he dropped out of his second graduate program. He had never produced a story, never managed a newsroom, never reported a fact. He had an office, a title, and a trust fund valued at approximately $22 million. The victim was a woman named Sophie Chen, age 31, an investigative reporter for the Providence Independent Journal. Now, I need you to understand who Sophie Chen is, because her story is the reason this case matters far beyond what happened in a parking garage. Sophie Chen was the daughter of immigrants. Her mother, Lynn, came to Providence from Taiwan in 1986 and worked as a seamstress on Atwells Avenue for 19 years. Her father, David, drove a delivery truck until his back gave out. He went on disability when Sophie was 14. The family lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in Silver Lake. Sophie put herself through school on a scholarship to the University of Rhode Island, worked nights at the campus library, graduated with honors, and got a job at the Providence Independent Journal at age 23. She started writing obituaries at $14.50 an hour and worked her way to the investigative desk in 6 years through talent and relentless work ethic. She made $52,000 a year. She was paying off $38,000 in student loans. She sent her mother $400 a month since her father had passed from a stroke 2 years earlier. Sophie had a 4-year-old daughter named May. May had been diagnosed with severe food allergies at age 2, the kind that required an EpiPen at all times, and quarterly visits to a pediatric allergist at $280 per visit after insurance. Sophie carried 2 EpiPens in her bag everywhere she went, one for the car and one in her pocket. She was a single mother. The father was not in the picture. She worked 10-hour days and then came home and read May a bedtime story every single night without exception. When Sophie Chen walked into my courtroom, she was wearing a charcoal blazer that was professional but not expensive, the kind you buy at a department store on sale and take good care of. Her blouse was pressed. Her shoes were simple black flats, practical, the shoes of a woman who spends her days on her feet chasing leads. She had a thin scar above her left eyebrow that was still pink, still healing. That scar is how she ended up in my courtroom. Her hands were folded in her lap. Her back was straight. She did not look at Tristan Mercer. She did not need to. She had the truth, and she trusted it. If you have ever been punished for telling the truth, if you have ever been bullied by someone with more power than you for simply doing your job, then please subscribe to this channel. We are a family here that believes the truth matters, and we stand with people who have the courage to tell it. Join us now. Here is what happened. In March 2024, Sophie Chen had been working on an investigative piece about labor violations at Mercer Media Holdings. She had obtained internal documents from a source showing that production staff at two Mercer-owned television stations had been systematically denied overtime pay for over 3 years. The unpaid overtime affected 87 employees, most of them camera operators, audio technicians, and production assistants making between $16 and $23 an hour. Total unpaid wages, according to the documents Sophie obtained, exceeded $1.4 million. On the evening of April 14, 2024, at approximately 7:22 p.m., Sophie approached Tristan Mercer outside the Mercer Media Holdings offices on Westminster Street in downtown Providence. He was walking to his vehicle, a $165,000 matte gray Mercedes AMG G63 with tinted windows and custom trim, parked in the executive garage. Sophie identified herself, stated her affiliation, and asked a single question. She said, "Mr. Mercer, I am working on a story about unpaid overtime at two of your family's television stations. Would you or your family like to comment before publication?" That was her question. Polite, professional, textbook journalism. She was giving him the opportunity to respond before the story ran, which is not just standard practice. It is the ethical obligation of any reporter worth the name. Tristan Mercer's response was captured on the parking garage's security cameras, all 3 angles, and on Sophie's own body camera, a small lapel device she wore as standard practice when approaching sources for comment. What happened next took 9 seconds. Tristan stepped toward Sophie. He said, "You think you can come after my family? My father owns the media in this city. He will bury your little newspaper and bury you with it." Then he slapped the recorder out of Sophie's hand. When she bent to pick it up, he grabbed her by the arm, pulled her upright, and struck her across the face with an open hand. The blow knocked her into the concrete pillar behind her. Her forehead hit the edge of the pillar. That is where the scar came from. She fell to the ground. Tristan stood over her and said, "Print that story, and I will make sure you never work in this state again. People like you do not get to touch people like me." Let me say that again. This 26-year-old man, who has never earned a single thing in his life, told a woman who works 10-hour days and puts herself through student loan payments and raises a daughter alone and sends money to her widowed mother every month that people like her do not get to touch people like him. And then he left her bleeding on a parking garage floor. Sophie Chen did not scream. She did not chase him. She sat on that concrete floor, touched her forehead, looked at the blood on her fingers, and picked up her recorder. It was still running. She called 911 at 7:24 p.m. Then she called her editor. The story ran 3 days later. Every word of it true, every fact verified, with a note at the bottom that read, "The author of this article was physically assaulted by a representative of Mercer Media Holdings during the reporting of this story." Officer Daniela Reyes, badge number 4487, responded to the garage. She reviewed the security footage on scene, photographed Sophie's injuries, and cited Tristan Mercer for assault. When officers went to the Mercer estate in East Greenwich to serve the citation the following morning, a family attorney met them at the gate and told them Tristan would not be available for comment and that the incident had been a misunderstanding. The citation was served by mail. But here is what happened next that set the stage for everything. Sophie's editor, Paul Cosgrove, who had run the Independent Journal's investigative desk for 22 years and did not scare easily, stood behind her completely. He called the newspaper's attorney and the State Press Association, and he filed a formal complaint with the Rhode Island Attorney General's office, not just for the assault, but for criminal intimidation of a journalist. The AG's office agreed. The case was expedited and landed on my desk. Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would do if you saw that footage. And if you believe that no amount of money gives someone the right to assault a journalist for asking a question, hit that like button. Because what happened in my courtroom changes everything. When Tristan Mercer walked into court on June 3rd, the entitlement preceded him through the door. He was wearing a custom Tom Ford suit, charcoal with a subtle window pane, the kind that runs about $5,800. His shoes were Berluti, that deep burnished calfskin, easily $2,100. On his wrist was an Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore, the rose gold chronograph, worth roughly $58,000. His tie was Hermes, the signature pattern, $400. He was accompanied by a criminal defense attorney from a firm in Boston, a partner who billed at $950 an hour, and a second attorney from a media law firm carrying a leather portfolio embossed with initials. They sat down at the defense table, and Tristan leaned back in his chair like he was waiting for a lunch reservation. Sophie Chen sat in the gallery, charcoal blazer, black flats, scar above her left eyebrow, hands folded, back straight. Beside her sat 4 other journalists from newsrooms across Rhode Island who had come to watch. Behind them sat 11 production workers from the 2 Mercer television stations, the people whose overtime had been stolen. They had taken unpaid time off to be there. The evidence was presented. The parking garage security footage was played from all 3 angles on the courtroom monitor. You could see Sophie approach. You could see the calm, professional posture. You could hear her question, clear and respectful. Then you could see Tristan step forward, hear the threat, see the slap, see the strike, see Sophie hit the pillar and fall. The courtroom was silent during those 9 seconds. Nobody moved. When the footage ended, one of the production workers in the gallery put her hand over her mouth. Officer Reyes testified. The medical report documenting Sophie's injuries was entered into evidence. A 2-inch laceration above the left eyebrow requiring 7 stitches, bruising to her right cheekbone, and a sprained wrist from the fall. Then Tristan's lead attorney presented a defense. He called it an emotional reaction to feeling ambushed. Sophie's body camera footage showed she had approached from 20 feet away in a well-lit garage, identified herself audibly, and given Tristan 8 seconds to respond before he moved toward her. There was no ambush. There was a question. Tristan waved his attorney off. He stood up, adjusted his Hermes tie, and addressed me directly. He told me Sophie had been harassing his family for weeks. Her records showed 2 phone calls and 1 email, all standard practice. He said the story was fabricated. The Labor Department had already opened an investigation confirming every finding. Then he looked at Sophie and said, "She got in my face. She provoked me. In my world, when someone comes after your family, you handle it. That is how men are raised where I come from." The courtroom went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop from the back row. My bailiff Carl, 6'4", former Marine, unfolded his arms and shifted his weight forward. Sophie did not react. She sat perfectly still, hands folded, eyes forward. I felt my jaw tighten. I sat absolutely still. My father, God rest his soul, an Italian immigrant who drove a taxi and opened a small grocery store on Federal Hill, used to tell me, "Character is how you treat those who cannot help you." I looked at Tristan Mercer in his $5,800 suit and his $58,000 watch, and I thought about Sophie Chen's $14.50 an hour starting salary, and her $38,000 in student loans, and the scar above her eye. Now here is where this story takes a turn you will not see coming. Tell me what you would do sitting in my chair. Your support helps share stories like this. Subscribe if you have not already. My clerk Dorothy handed me a sealed folder that had been delivered to the court that morning by the AG's office. I opened it. Inside were 3 additional complaints. 3 other people had come forward in the weeks after Sophie's story to report that Tristan Mercer had physically intimidated or assaulted them in separate incidents over the past 2 years. A former Mercer Media intern who said Tristan threw a coffee mug at her head. A freelance photographer who said Tristan shoved him into a wall at a company event. And a production assistant who said Tristan grabbed her wrist hard enough to leave bruises. All 3 had been paid settlements by Mercer family attorneys. All 3 had signed non-disclosure agreements. All 3 came forward voluntarily after seeing Sophie's courage. The arrogance drained from Tristan Mercer's face. His attorney whispered something urgent. Tristan shook his head. His jaw was working, but no words were coming out. His hand went to his Audemars Piguet, adjusting it, fidgeting with the crown. The confidence that had walked through the door 40 minutes earlier was gone. If you have stuck with me this long, you are incredible. Hit subscribe. What comes next is the lecture that broke Tristan Mercer. I set the folder down. I folded my hands. I took a breath. And I spoke to Tristan Mercer for what my clerk later told me was just over 4 minutes. but I will tell you it felt like the most important words I had spoken in a very long time. Mr. Mercer, I am fining you $50,000. Every penny of that fine will go to the Rhode Island Press Freedom Fund, which provides legal defense and support to journalists who face intimidation and violence while doing their jobs. You struck a reporter for asking you a question. The money will make sure the next reporter who asks a powerful person an uncomfortable question has someone standing behind them. His attorney stood. I was not finished. You will perform 500 hours of community service. You will serve those hours at the Providence Community Newsroom, a nonprofit that trains young journalists from underserved neighborhoods. You will sit with those students. You will help them research. You will help them edit. You will learn what it actually takes to report a story, to chase a fact, to tell the truth when powerful people would prefer you stay quiet. You will do it without your title, without your last name on the door, and without a single Mercer attorney in the building. Furthermore, I am referring the 3 additional assault complaints to the Rhode Island Attorney General for full investigation, and I am recommending that all non-disclosure agreements associated with those complaints be reviewed for enforceability under Rhode Island's recently enacted accountability statutes. I leaned forward and looked directly at him. Mr. Mercer, you told this court that when someone comes after your family, you handle it. Let me tell you what Sophie Chen was doing. She was not coming after your family. She was doing her job. Her job is to ask questions. Her job is to find the truth. Her job is to hold people accountable, especially people who have the power and the money to avoid accountability. That is what journalism is. And you hit her for it. You earn nothing. You produce nothing. You have a title your father invented for you and a trust fund you were born into. Sophie Chen earns everything. She started writing obituaries at $14.50 an hour and worked her way up through talent and sweat and a refusal to be intimidated. She sends $400 a month to her widowed mother. She carries 2 EpiPens for her daughter. She works 10-hour days and reads bedtime stories every night. And when you knocked her to a concrete floor and left her bleeding, she picked up her recorder and she kept working. That is character, Mr. Mercer. That is courage. That is something your family's money cannot buy and your title cannot replace. You said people like her do not get to touch people like you. Let me correct that. In this courtroom, in this country, people like Sophie Chen are the ones who keep people like you honest. A free press is not a convenience. It is a right. And when you strike a journalist for exercising that right, you do not just assault a person. You assault the principle that makes democracy function. I will not allow it. Not in my courtroom. Not in my city. The courtroom erupted. Applause from every row. The 4 journalists in the gallery were on their feet. The 11 production workers were crying and clapping. Sophie Chen sat perfectly still, hands folded, tears running down her face, but she was smiling. That quiet, exhausted, relieved smile of someone who had been carrying something heavy and finally felt it lift. Tristan Mercer stood motionless. His Tom Ford suit looked like a costume. His Audemars Piguet hung on his wrist like a prop. He opened his mouth and closed it. Then he said very quietly, "I am sorry." He said it to the floor. He could not look at Sophie. Smash that like button if you believe that a free press is worth protecting. This story has one final chapter. 5 months later, the Rhode Island Attorney General filed charges against Tristan Mercer on 2 additional counts of assault based on the complaints from former Mercer employees. The NDAs were voided. He pleaded guilty to 1 count and received an additional 12 months of probation. The Rhode Island Department of Labor completed its investigation into Mercer Media Holdings and found systematic overtime violations affecting 87 employees, totaling $1.47 million in unpaid wages. The company was ordered to pay full restitution plus penalties. Richard Mercer, the father, issued a statement saying the company would comply fully. He did not mention his son. Sophie Chen was awarded the New England Press Association's Courage in Journalism Prize that fall. She stood at the podium and dedicated the award to her mother, to her father's memory, and to every young reporter who has ever been told to sit down and be quiet. Her overtime story was picked up by 2 national outlets and led to labor audits at media companies across 3 states. Her daughter May started kindergarten in September. Sophie told a colleague it was the proudest morning of her life, walking May to the front door with her little backpack and her EpiPen tucked in the front pocket. May turned around at the door and waved, and Sophie stood on the sidewalk waving back until she could not see her anymore. I think about that case often. I think about 9 seconds of footage, a question asked politely, a fist swung in response, and a woman who picked up her recorder off a concrete floor, wiped the blood from her forehead, and kept working. That is the thing about the truth. You can hit it, you can threaten it, you can try to buy it off with an NDA. But if the person carrying it refuses to let go, there is nothing on earth that can stop it. My father used to tell me, character is how you treat those who cannot help you. Sophie Chen could not help Tristan Mercer. She had no power over him. She had no money, no leverage, no connections. All she had was a question and the right to ask it. And he hit her for it. That tells you everything you need to know about his character. And the fact that she got up, picked up her recorder, and published the story anyway tells you everything you need to know about hers. To anyone watching who has power over others, whether you own a company, run a newsroom, manage a team, or carry a title, the people who ask you hard questions are not your enemies. They are your mirror. Do not break the mirror because you do not like what you see. To anyone out there who has ever been silenced, who has ever been told to sit down, who has ever been afraid to speak up because the person on the other side had more money, more power, more connections, remember Sophie Chen. She was a single mother making $52,000 a year with $38,000 in student loans and a scar above her eye. And she published the story anyway. You can speak your truth too. It matters more than you know. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you believe in real justice, do 3 things for me. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss a story like this. Leave a comment and tell me about a time someone told the truth, even when it was dangerous, or about a journalist or teacher or truth teller in your life who deserves recognition. And watch the next video, where a pharmaceutical CEO refuses to testify about price gouging life-saving medication, and the mother of a sick child stands up in the gallery and says 6 words that silence the entire courtroom. That one will wreck you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that justice is not just a word, it is a promise. And I keep my promises.